Care is a real focus for Fair Work.
Do you think we'll ever reach a point where payroll compliance can be fully automated?
Absolutely.
So I guess it's important as a provider or employer to really understand what the employee's getting out of it.
I have lots of thoughts on overpayments. You
like
cannot
receiving
offset.
them, don't like making
Yeah,
them?
pretty much.
Yeah.
I love finding them. I'm like,
Yeah.
Welcome to Time Well Spent, the podcast for decision makers, providers, and everyone working to make a difference in care. I'm Dane Mitchell, joined by my co-host, Rose Plater.
Together, we bring 31 years of combined experience and still counting, and a shared passion for reimagining aged care and community health. From policy and reform to leadership, culture, and connection, this is where we explore new ideas, hear what leaders really think, and uncover what it takes to create environments where time is truly well spent.
Right now, payroll compliance is the fastest growing risk in aged care. In the past 3 years, more than 1 in 3 providers have uncovered wage errors, some worth millions, not from greed, from complexity. Rosters that never match reality, awards that read like tax law, and a constant churn of government and Fair Work changes that make even good systems fall behind. Every board worries about occupancy, funding cuts, reforms, but the quiet disaster hitting care providers isn't revenue, it's payroll. Today we're joined by Siobhain Simpson, partner at StuartBrown, audited to hundreds of providers and proudly Irish, to talk about how we fix the systems, keep up with the laws, and finally start paying people right. Siobhain, if that's how I pronounce it.
that's very good.
Pretty good.
I'm very impressed by that. Yes.
Good start.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
You're more than welcome.
You've audited hundreds of providers.
I have, haven't I? So lucky.
And how often do you find payroll errors, and why are they so common in even well-run organisations?
I'll break it up a little bit. So how often do we find them? We have never not found them. It's how big are they and how broad are they? So the error rate in the samples that we choose is about 57, 58%. And that's been consistent year on year. That can be over and or underpayments, but I have never tested an organisation and not found something. It's impossible.
And you're an audit partner at StuartBrown. We had Stu Hutchin on a couple of weeks ago. But why isn't a chartered accountant spending so much? You were saying to me before that you're spending half your time, chartered accountant, auditor, auditing payroll.
I actually think the fact that I do that is evidence of the fact that there is an issue. There is a really difficult period at the moment where it has become so apparent that there are problems with the systems, there are problems with the awards, that somebody like me should not be working in this space. I do believe in 5 years I won't be working in this space. Like I'm an apocalyptimist, which is a term I learned during COVID. I just think it's so perfect. But I believe that the systems will evolve to a point where I'm not needed. I hope so anyway. But why is it?
Even as particularly interesting, like well-run organisations.
Well-run organisations.
And you're finding
everywhere.
problems there.
Yeah. So you have, in aged care in particular, you've got a 24/7 work pattern. So when you have a 24/7 work pattern, what that means is you cannot avoid some of the more complex areas of payroll compliance. You're working at night, you're working at the weekend, and you can't avoid that. So you've got penalties, you've got overtime, you've got additional leave for shift workers, you've got all of these really complex areas that if you were a 9 to 5 org, you wouldn't have because you're just daytime ordinary hours. The minute you go into those later hours of the day, the weekend and overtime, you're in risky territory because you're interpreting areas of the modern awards that are so complex. So you've got 24/7 work pattern, unavoidable in aged care. You have modern awards that, I mean this with respect, are like the Frankenstein of anything. You've got these awards that have had pieces just bolted onto them that don't necessarily fit in with the rest of the modern awards. So rather than completely revitalize, which they are planning to do, they add bits in and then they don't sort of coalesce together properly. So you've got 24/7 work pattern with an extraordinarily complex modern award. And then you layer in the fact that right now, 2025, we do not have the systems in place that can hack both of that. So we're not yet at the point, and it's starting to evolve, where you would have an AI that can interpret 4 different elements of a shift pattern that interact with 8 clauses and pay it properly. Because a lot of the time you need to eyeball it. So we bought a system that doesn't interpret overtime. You have to interpret overtime, which is astonishing when you think where we are in the world. You have these unavoidable circumstances. And that's why I always think, regardless of how many compliance audits you've done, you're only as good as your last payroll interpretation. It's such a human interaction as well. If you change staff, so say you did a full fix, you've done your audit, you've gone in, you've set everything up, you've configured it, you found underpayments, you fixed underpayments, and then 6 months later, you change your payroll processor. Someone new comes in and they are interpreting a clause completely differently. You're at risk again. So that's why it is an iterative process. You've got to keep checking. So good orgs will only be shielded from underpayments for the length of time between their audits. So the trick now, it's not can we have no underpayments, it's how long can we go
without another
one. Yeah. And how far back do we have to go? So rather than trying to completely limit the underpayment, what you're trying to do is limit the length of time. You got to go 6 years back. That's the rule. It's linked to the small claims court.
Yes.
So employees have 6 years to make a claim, and that's why we have this 6-year back pay timeframe. You want to just be able to say, well, if we find something, it will only be a year max, because we're testing all the time.
So you do an annual audit.
Do an annual, yeah. Or not build into your systems the internal controls that allow you to check it, but remain completely curious and skeptical about the fact that you will have one.
It's not
it will be okay.
It's not a box to tick. It's a process you have to have in place.
Oh, it's a living, breathing. It's always going to change.
So you've mentioned overtime.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the other common mistakes that you're seeing?
So the bigger ones, the ones that I see that cause the most stress would be additional shift worker leave. So if you meet the definition of a shift worker under the NES, and it's generally driven by
NES is the National
Employment Standards, which sort of underpin all the modern awards and the enterprise agreements. If you meet the definition of a shift worker, and that can change based on whether you're award or EA, but it's generally, if you work regularly weekends, if you work regularly night shifts, you're generally going to be a shift worker. You get an extra week's annual leave a year. Now, the problem is if you don't know how to identify shift workers, then you're not going to be able to ring fence them and give them an extra week's leave. I've got some clients that just give everyone an extra week and go, it's too hard to identify them regularly. But as Stuart would have pointed out, this loss making in the sector, the margins are not there to make those kinds of overpayments either. So shift workers are a really big one. If you don't do it properly, it can be so expensive, because you could be looking at 6 years of back pay, which would be 6 weeks per employee. And it's huge.
And I guess that's also, if you're paying everyone that extra week, you're taking away the incentive to actually do the shifts that are harder to fill and the shifts work as well.
Yeah, you have no variance between the two. The other trick in aged care is the nurses award. So nurses get 5 weeks anyway. So then you can sometimes have situations where people go, oh, we're grand, they're getting 6, they're getting 5 weeks, we're fine. But they actually need to get 6. So, oh God, I'm just going to go down rabbit holes with this, because
if you are RN or EN, you are entitled to 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
And then if you're a shift work, it's 6.
Yes. And then just to add just complexity to it, which was the rabbit hole I was just launching myself down there, is AINs. So assistant nurses were moved from the Nurses Award over to SHADs under work value. So they basically shifted them all across They're now direct care workers, but they will have grandfathered that extra week's additional leave.
Is that those who were in employment at that point in time? So if you're employing a new AIN today,
will they be a personal care worker, PCW or direct care worker?
Yeah, under the SHADs.
Yeah,
and therefore, if they were. Oh.
Yeah, so a lot of them do a 1.9%, sort of like a levy. Instead of getting the leave, they get an additional bulked up base rate by 1.9.
Yeah.
And so that's just one area. And we've talked for I don't know how long, and there would be more time to talk.
Incredibly complex for providers to manage, right? Like the pressure they're under to get that right is tough.
And it comes down to one person running a payroll under pressure as well. The timeframes on payrolls can become really important. So you might run your fortnights up to a Sunday, then you've got to get your timesheets in and approved, and then you've got to run a payroll and pay on a Wednesday. You know, if you're shortening that at all, you're putting that team under even more pressure. And we've seen orgs that, because they've made acquisitions, they have multiple pays.
Yeah.
Like week to week to week to week, because they've kept everyone on the same cycles. And you've going to add in having to actually become an IR lawyer.
Opportunities for error, right? Like you're creating a lot of opportunities for error.
It increases.
Is it a governance risk too? Like, is it a risk for boards?
Yeah, no, it is now with closing the loopholes. That's the legislation that came out on 1 Jan this year.
Yeah.
Everyone is now aware the penalties have increased. The risk of prosecution has increased. So Fair Work can now kick the can down to Director of Public Prosecution for wage theft, effectively. And that's criminalised across Australia. It used to just be, I think Queensland and Victoria had their own wage theft laws, and now it's federalised. So you have the spectre of all of that hanging over orgs. Now, if you have controls in place, you limit your risk as a director that this could be laid at your feet.
And what is a basic control that you could have in place?
I am so conscious of independence when I say this, because, you know, what kind of carpetbagger is like me? I'm the control. But no, having an internal control whereby you have some independence in the checking of your pays. So whether it's on a cycle of annually, or when you have staff changes, system changes, award changes, and a new EA, you know, all of these, what are your triggers to deep dive it? And I genuinely think doing it independently is a really good idea, because...
So have someone, obviously yourself or someone similar, to audit it for you
someone separate.
Yeah.
Because I cannot review my own work.
Yes.
Like I just can't. I don't see it. I'm blinkered.
Yeah,
if I've written it,
I have the same
good
problem.
night. So that is the difficulty of having it done in-house, but also the scariness when this happens. When you find something, everyone's a little bit triggered. If you have somebody external that's like, I just have to say whether this is right or not, and work through that process, I just think the independence piece is really important. Whoever you use, just make them outside the org. It will go so much more smoothly. But ensuring you have those in place is really important. There's some tools coming out now where you can potentially use your data to check it. There's bots and all of that jazz. I call it jazz because I don't understand it. Like it's all that jazz. It's magic. Yeah, absolute wizardry. But you can use them. And in my head, they are actual robots. Like that's the sad bit. It's like some robot doing the typing. But ultimately, you could use them to your advantage to look for specific issues. If you're big enough to afford those. If you're not, then have someone independent checking it. And when changes come out, just check that you're in line with those. That's the really hard part. Because not only are you HR or payroll, you're also by default a lawyer, because you're having to interpret complex pieces of legislation.
So that payroll employee at the helm is a very crucial person to think about in terms of training, in terms of understanding the stress that they're under. And as you mentioned, those 3 days often to turn around from timesheets to pay.
Yeah, I think switching the mindset that it's okay if we do have something. It's okay if we do find something, because we're always going to have something. We're always going to find something. And reducing that fear, it's such a human thing.
Yeah.
Reduce the fear of what happens if we do find it.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. You'll back pay it. You'll move on.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge shift, and that's got to be toned from the top. That has to come down from the board to go, we take this seriously, but if we have something, we'll fix it. We'll move on. That kind of acceptance.
But I think, if CEOs or board members or owners of businesses are concerned about the impact on their team of finding an underpayment. I mean, I've done this exercise fairly recently, and we found a few people that were slightly underpaid. We backpaid them. We adjusted it. They were happy. They were, thanks for checking. So, if you find systemic failures, it might be a different story, right? But small things that you're saying you're finding, as long as you're checking and catching it up, we've found it to be very well received.
Even with systemics. Yeah. Like, this is the bit that I couldn't, until we found out, I didn't really wrap my head around. So we were brought in to do, when you have an underpayment, there is no legislation that requires you to report yourself to Fair Work. They say that generally if you're in the millions, you report to Fair Work. That's sort of, even though there's no threshold published or anything like that, when you look at the undertakings, they're all significant. But when you do that, Fair Work issue an undertaking, which is basically a bit of a public slap on the wrist. It explains who was impacted, how many employees, and what the issues were. For someone like me, wonderful, because you get to go and read them and make a little graph and, keep up to date in the gossip. Anyway, as part of that, you have to go back in and do 2 audits consecutively after the underpayment, and Fair Work have to review those audit reports from an external audit. We've done them. And as part of it, you generally have to interview the staff. So we've gone in year 1, found more issues. So that was on top of the reported issues. We found more. They fixed them. We came back. So we interviewed that year. We came back and we interviewed again the year after. And we were kind of gearing up for, these are going to be hard conversations, because you weirdly become the face of the issue because you're the one talking to the staff about it. Everyone, there was not one complaint. The resounding response was, we work for an employer that's willing to be transparent, that's willing to do the work to make sure our pays are right, and we appreciate that. Which I was so surprised, cynical old me. I was like, oh, they're going to have the rage. They didn't have the rage at all. It worked the other way because the employees were just so grateful that your retention goes up, because I think the understanding is there that this is hard to do. But if you're seen to be quite willing to be upfront and own your mistakes, it actually works in your benefit.
I agree.
And what about overpayment? We mentioned underpayment, but overpayment.
Absolute tricksters, those overpayments. So I have lots of thoughts on overpayments. You
like
cannot
receiving
offset.
them, don't like making
them. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I love finding them. I'm like, with overpayments, there's 2 bits. There's the financial sustainability, because in my opinion, you're overpaying without providing additional service. So it's one thing if you're overspending, but your participants in programs or your residents in an aged care facility are getting additional benefit. That's one thing. But with overpayments, they're receiving nothing additional. You're just overpaying for the same service. So I see it from a financial viability perspective that it is in your interest to ring fence them, and where you can, to fix them. Hard work. There's lots of Australian phrases I love. Hard yakka is one of them. I don't understand it. Like, I don't know where it comes from, but it's a good phrase because it's fun to say. But it's hard to rein those back in, because you have to have consultation with employees and go, we've made this mistake. We've overpaid you. We can't do that any longer.
And can you recover?
No,
payment?
You cannot recover. So Fair Work are absolutely, vehement is another word I can't really say very well, but they are very serious about not offsetting unders and overs within the pay period. There's one thing
even to the same individual?
Exactly. To that same individual. They see it as, just because you overpaid doesn't mean that you can offset against an underpayment.
Wow.
Except
seems
if they're
unreasonable.
Yeah, well, I suppose the way they say it is, you still underpaid that. That could have been a discretionary choice you made to overpay. And now you're going back on that, saying, no, it wasn't discretionary. It was an accident. So they see it as, you've underpaid. That's a standalone crime. Just because you overpaid over here doesn't mean you did that on purpose. So the only way you can offset is in a scenario where if you, for example, don't classify something as overtime, which should have been classified as overtime, it's a good chance you paid a shift penalty on it. And there's no shift penalties on overtime. So you can offset shift penalties against an underpayment of overtime.
Gotcha.
Because they're linked.
Yes.
Those are linked clauses, and the reinterpretation of those same hours, you wouldn't be paying the shift penalty had you classified it as overtime. Those you can, they're proximate. But you can't offset anything outside of a pay period. So a shift penalty in one pay period cannot be offset against an overtime underpayment in another. They have to be the same hours. And you can't look at a full year and go, well, overs and unders work around. Let's move on. And they're really, really serious about that. There's a legal case that's just come through, which basically confirms that. Has to be within the pay period, has to be linked clauses. So it is an absolute bugbear in a sense, because I have clients who have booted above.
In other words, paying them more than the base award.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to track all that.
Yeah. But then because they have overpaid on separate clauses, they can't offset that buffer against the underpayment. And I've seen legal advice that goes, no. And historically, you can have offset clauses. So you need an offset clause in your contracts. They have strengthened over the years. But if you're looking at a 6-year time frame, that's the funny thing. We look at all this stuff through the lens of today's compliance environment. But 6 years ago, it wasn't there. We hadn't had those big underpayments. So it was a very different world. It was like when I grew up, not that long ago, but when I grew up, we had no seatbelts. You played corners in the car, like you were flying around the place on purpose. And now we have seatbelts and all of that. So it's just completely different.
But over the last few years, there's been hundreds of HR, industrial relations law changes in probably the last 3 or 4 years. That's accurate.
Yeah, it's been really, really difficult. So modern awards were
closing loopholes, casual conversion rules, same job, same pay.
The labour hire one, that's a really interesting one. So if you are in a labour hire and you're at an org for longer than 3 months, you have to be paid in line with their enterprise agreement. So if you work side by side, doing the same job and you're there for more than 3 months under labour hire, the labour hire has to pay you in line with the EA of the org you're working for.
Have the law changes made it harder for providers?
Really difficult. This is where you work in payroll processing. Our benchmark came out in June 25. The corporate overhead survey said on average, I think it's 0.64 is what you have in people and culture. You've got 0.64 of a person having to keep up with all the legislation change and be a lawyer, interpret complex clauses. So it has made this so much harder. And layer in on top of that work value. Work value. So that's the movement to increase the base rates of highly feminized workforces because it's been proven they are underpaid due to time off to have children and all of those things. So base rates have gone up in the first round of work value in aged care by 15%. And then we've had subsequent rounds of work value, January 25, and another one October, and there's another one in August of next year as well. But what they have done is not only increase the base rates, they've actually made subtle but significant changes to the way that you interpret the modern awards for home care and aged care. So we mentioned the AINs moving from the nurses award over to the aged care award and SHADs. You have all of that complexity. Progression's been removed from SHADs in home care. Home care now has its own schedule, which has indirectly impacted disability, because I also work a little bit in disability too. NDIS. Yeah, in the NDIS. And over there, you've got SIL providers, supported independent living, who had been paying under Schedule E, which was the disability home care schedule. And now they've carved home care out of that schedule. And I think they're moving to a space where they're finally going to make that confirmation that the SIL, supported independent living, has to be paid under Schedule B. This is how complex it is. Like it's incredibly complex. And 0.64 of a person has to make these calls under the pressure of getting a payroll done within 2 days.
2 days, yeah.
2 days.
Is there a compliance trap that the reforms have created, or what's the biggest one for aged care and NDIS providers? Is there something you're seeing most? orgs get caught in?
Broken shift came out in 1 July 22. That's for shads.
Can you explain what that is?
Could I? I try. I don't know if anyone can explain what it is, to be honest. So broken shift used to have a definition. So if I was a terrible waitress for quite some time through university. I was the worst. I used to top up round tables with other tables' wine. And then everyone got free wine because I was like, oh, you're drinking red. But I could be scheduled to come in and do a morning shift. So I would do, say, 3 hours in the morning to do the breakfast inexpertly, and then be brought back in for reasons I don't know why to do a dinner. So under shads from 1 July 22, you had to be paid an allowance. If that happened, if you had a break in the shift, you have to be paid an allowance.
An allowance in between for a meal or?
No, so just an allowance for the fact that your day's been disrupted by these 2 broken shifts. But what shads did was it removed the definition of how long between those 2 pieces of work would constitute a broken shift and what's the next day. So we have to make the assumption. We've deep dived it and gone and looked at shads, gone and looked at Fair Work and said, okay, well, it's either 30 minutes or an hour. 30 or 60 minutes is a meal break. So anything beyond that, so between 1 hour and what we think maybe 10 is a broken shift. And then you get the allowance paid.
And that doesn't matter if it's on what day that is.
What day does matter, because if it rolls into the next day and it's not separated by a sleepover, then it's separate and it's the next day. Because the sleepover is a whole area over there.
So if I'm finishing my shift at 11:59 p.m. and I'm starting at 10 a.m. the next day, that's fine.
No, that's what, I learned the term Dorothy Dixer. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a person for ages, and people were like, oh, Dorothy Dixer. And then I realized it's a planted question, and you haven't planted that question. But it is a really good example, because if you started at 10 a.m. and you finished at 11:59, you've gone outside a span of 12, and you're also paying double time on the hours from 10 p.m. to midnight. This is how wild it is.
So how do providers actually manage that?
You've got to have
0.6 of a person.
Yeah. 0.6 under pressure, 24/7 work pattern with overtime, with casuals, and now mandatory minutes thrown in.
So basically it's a tech solution, because it would be impossible for 0.6 of a person. Providers are losing money, as Stu pointed out. I think it was $3.10 per bed per day across the industry.
And when that happens, with mandatory minutes, you're never going to cut your care workforce. Yeah. You're going to cut your corporate overhead. You're going to cut your corporate workforce.
It's the only option you have.
Exactly. And then you risk this. So, that whack-a-mole game where, one pops up and you hit it with a hammer and blah, 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 blah. That's what this is. So you get that one sorted, financial sustainability, but then up pops your workforce risk and payroll risk. So the best way to go about it is, I think anyway, you risk assess. If this one goes wrong, what are the most expensive ones to go wrong? And let's just check those. So insufficient break, double time, Christ on a bike, that one is so expensive when you get it wrong. So do you want me to talk to you about that?
Talk about
your faces say no.
No. This is us going, wow. Just so
insufficient break, double time is the one that our team go out, and we have this approach, and you take a sample of time and attendance and you run it through the models that we build. And royal we, I don't build them. The smart people in my team build
robots
them. Those robots, the bots. You build a model and you run that through, and we reinterpret and then say, what's the difference? Then my number one question is, how have they treated insufficient break? So insufficient break in aged care and in disability. So a little bit different, because that's what adds the complexity as well. Like nothing is consistent across it. So aged care employees, nurses, and then you've got shads. With nurses, if you do not have a 10-hour break between shifts, automatically your next shift is at double time. The entire shift, you're paying a double. So it's like you're paying for an additional person, but you're not getting additional work.
Or additional minutes.
Exactly.
Finance.
You're just paying double the price. And that's double time, and that attracts leave and superannuation, unlike overtime, which doesn't. So you're paying double the super, You're accruing, the leave is just accrued off the hours, but you're paying double. For an aged care employee, you have to have worked overtime in the first shift to trigger that second double time. So again, you've got this subtle but really important difference between two cohorts within your same organization.
And 0.6 of a person's making that decision for 100, 200 staff.
Yeah. And if the rules, oftentimes you can't really build rules. Sometimes you can manage to build the rules in where the system recognizes the pattern and pays the pattern. And sometimes systems don't. So you have to be cognizant of that. And then in SHADs, it's the same as aged care. The overtime shift triggers if there's insufficient break, it triggers the double time. But then you've got some EAs that drive it down to 8 hours from 10. And then we've seen orgs that have individual flexibility agreements to reduce that as well, which is a whole area of crazy that I just can't get near because it's so, IFAs are the worst. They are the worst. Just leaned into the microphone for effect because they are so difficult to manage. But that one clause, if you got that wrong, two things are happening. One is it's a very expensive clause to get wrong. But the second is because you were never aware of it, you were letting that pattern happen. So there was no control to reduce that work pattern occurring. If you know it's there, automatically the people who build your rosters and check your rosters go, oh, that's an insufficient break. We won't roster that, or we won't let that happen.
Or we'll only let it happen if that stops agency usage.
Exactly. So we'll balance it up.
Yeah.
But if you don't even know it's in your landscape, you're not reducing it. So it could be absolutely rampant. And it is so expensive. So that's the number one I look for. But it's also one of the few areas, because I see it overpaid as often as I see it underpaid, where orgs go, we will double pay the second shift with an insufficient break without the trigger of overtime. So they're just throwing money away.
Wow.
And imagine trying to rein that back in from a workforce that's used to it, that looks at the roster and goes, insufficient break, I'm getting double time for that next shift. And then suddenly they're not. How do you manage that? So it's one that I would self-check. And the easiest way to do that is to look for it. Just pick a roster and look for the pattern and see what's happened. Follow it through. Because if you can see it being paid correctly, you know it's not systemic.
And don't just assume it's 10. Make sure that you're referencing the right gap.
Yeah, go back and look at whatever you're paying under and read the clause because they're so complicated.
It's been a little while since I did payroll, but once upon a time, there would be certain things that we would have, or we would try and work with employees to sign to remove some of these difficulties like minimum break or split shifts and those things.
Yeah.
Can you still do that under the current awards, or is that all?
It'd be an IFA, wouldn't it?
It'd be an IFA. So this is where I have that great ability as an accountant to just be like, you go talk to a lawyer about that.
See, I did that exercise recently and the IFA was suggested for some of our employees. But you have to negotiate that after they already start.
Yeah, and
it makes it incredibly difficult. So you have a second negotiation. You can't put the terms that you want to agree to in the contract that you give them when you offer them employment. You've then got to go and have a second conversation with it. It's very impractical.
And here's the problem, because Fair Work say an IFA is appropriate if the employee is better off overall, but they do not define whether that better off is monetary or from the ability, flexibility. They don't define that. So
you leave yourself open to interpretation.
Yeah. And what's going to happen is in 2 or 3 years' time, somebody big is going to have an underpayment with an IFA. And then they are actually going to clarify that. And then everyone's going to have to retrospectively look back. Right now, there's no case law on IFAs. There's you go and look at the website on Fair Work and they list out what has to happen. But they don't clarify that piece about, well, what constitutes better off overall. And in my opinion, there's going to be a big underpayment. When the underpayments happen, you go, oh, wow, yeah, that makes total sense. But until then, you're spinning wheels. So in my opinion, I don't like IFAs because of that grey area, because I cannot hand on heart say whether Fair Work's intent is that it is a monetary improvement or if flexibility constitutes better off.
So I guess it's important as a provider or employer to really understand what the employee is getting out of it in terms of their choice and their discretion, and record that with your IFA.
Completely. I use the phrase ducks in a row so often. Like, get your ducks in a row. Make it reasonable that you made that decision. You know, get advice, get legal advice, and go, is this okay? Now find a lawyer that's going to actually put that down, you know, in paper. But you're doing your best to ensure that the decision you made was based on sound judgment and made sense at the time and had the employee in mind when you made the decision. That's what it's all about.
But both Rose and I are board members of community not-for-profits, and
I'm feeling a little scared now.
it's incredibly complex what you've just explained, right? And how a provider is going to manage that on 0.6 of an average staff member across the industry. But what questions should directors or owners or board members of providers, aged care, NDIS, what questions should they be asking about payroll compliance to their team from a governance perspective?
I suppose I see it quite nuanced because of the external audit background.
Yes.
A lot of times boards will assume their external auditors are doing this. I do it in my external audits generally because so I can sleep at night, you know, but you're only going to do it rotationally as well. You're not going to do it every year. And a lot of auditors don't go into that level of detail because these would not be material in that year that they're providing the audit opinion. So you cannot rest on your laurels that, oh God, weird phrase again. Sorry, I'm rolling out all the strange ones, but you cannot rely, one, that your external auditor is going to pick it up, and you certainly can't rely that your staff are. So the questions to ask are, what are we doing to check at least these larger instances? What's our position? Where are our business rules? It's a really good question.
So your opinion is that, say, the business committee or the finance committee within an organisation should be looking at it occasionally to make sure they're comfortable with
I have to ask the question, 70% of your expenses. It's actually, in ways, polish the turd and go, this is actually a really easy way to check 70% of your expenses.
Yes.
And a significant amount of your balance sheet items as well, because leave entitlements are all in there too. So, but it's also the reputational risk, huge reputational risk.
So given all the changes, I guess, in this space, would you be recommending that boards talk to their audit partner now and talk about whether that's in this cycle of?
Yeah, they'll tell you no. They'll be like, we're grand. Because to do that level of testing, it's not really within the remit of external audit to get right down into, is your sock allowance correct? Is your stocking allowance correct? Because it's sock for boys, stockings for girls, random. But that's in a lot of these EAs. So the question is, one, your audit opinion should really cover you for material. Right? So park that over there, happy days. What are you doing to interpret your compliance environment and be aware of your risk right down to that stocking allowance? And in that sense, you need internal controls. You need exception reporting. So you're asking that risk assessment question. Do we have exception reporting? And an exception reporting is reports that can be run in your system. And the best one is, give me a report of over 76 hours in a fortnight. Who worked over 76? And you take a small sample, you cross-reference to your payroll and go, did they get paid period overtime? Yes, tick. Happy days. I went to an audit conference once and they talked about...
It'd be riveting.
It was so exciting. Well, it was, because I like this stuff. But it basically talked about the needle in the haystack and how the internal controls were the metal detector. So that's how you do it. You have those exception reports. That's what you do internal. You have a third party check somewhere along the way. Somebody independent going, okay, I don't think I agree with your laundry allowance, or meal allowance is another rando crazy one, because if you work more than an hour of overtime, you're entitled to meal allowance. But in a lot of residential aged care, you have adequate dining facilities and they may or may not provide a meal to that employee, which negates the payment of that allowance. But you've got to prove that you did that.
You get documented.
And documented and have a policy, and the employee needed to know that they could get that. And is it an adequate meal? Because, like a frozen pizza is probably not going to meet that definition. Has to be an adequate meal with adequate dining. So those are the types of things that can just get out of control. So you get the exception reporting and you have an independent check. A payroll specific audit is, to me, I know I have a conflict of interest because I provide them, but I do see it because I can see all the different sides, and from the perspective of the directors, it is the only way you're going to get comfort, that right down to the sock allowance, this is being checked.
And that should be once a year?
Again, that one is
at least.
Well, it's a kind of, it's your own risk assessment as well. It's going,
how comfortable are we?
How comfortable are we? Yeah. How far apart do these? How much of a back pay do we want to pay? Now you could get, we call them payroll health checks. You could get one of them done, and if it's clean, you know, it's never going to be fully clean. But if, say, you've got minimal systemic issues, they're not high value, then you could go, you know what, we're actually pretty good. We're going to have this on a rotational 2 to 3 year base deep dive. And then we'll do one every time we change systems and every time we change EAs or the modern award changes. And then you've got a process in place and you've given it some thought and you've risk assessed it and gone, no, I think we're good for every 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But the minute we get a new payroll person that may not be that payroll person, we'll get a new one.
Yeah. And I would assume as a board member, that one makes me feel comfortable that we're paying our people for the hard work that they do. But also in terms of my risk and personal liability, that I'm also protecting myself, ensuring good governance over payroll.
You can prove there was no intent. If there is an underpayment,
because there's
no intent. There is,
up to criminal penalties for board members, right?
Yeah, that's pretty significant
Directors
penalties
members,
now as well. It can be, I think, up to 3 times the underpayment itself or a set amount. Fair Work have been given much more powers now to go and figure this stuff out. They are currently going to be looking at disability. They've announced that. This is their new area because SHADs, it's just so complicated. But they will circle back to aged care again. You know, care is a real focus for Fair Work because it's so complex, because you have these work patterns, because you have these complex industrial agreements. And also these employees are doing really hard work and not getting paid a huge amount of money. So the least we can all do is get that right. You know, pay them what they're owed.
Do you think we'll ever reach a point where payroll compliance can be fully automated?
Absolutely. I'd be on a beach somewhere, not working, being like, yay. I think it has to get to that point. Like AI, this is so perfect for an AI.
Yes.
You know, interpret, learn the work patterns, interpret, repeat.
But is the technology there now?
I don't believe so, no. Yeah. It will be. There's talk.
What needs to change? Like what?
We need to get AI rostering tools. The AI can build a roster and then check roster to actual and then set the rules and interpret. Because right now, they can't.
If you could give a piece of advice to CEOs in the sector related to payroll compliance, what would that be?
You're always going to have an underpayment, but it's much better when you find it yourself. And you can then turn that into a good news story. But if someone else finds it, it's completely different. You're on the back foot, you're defensive immediately, and you're the not-for-profit that underpaid. Like you're the charity that stole from workers. Like that's how it gets spun. But if you find it yourself, you own that message, you pay people correctly, and you can actually build that rapport, build that. I'm an accountant, so I don't know what this word is, but you know when people are all happy and stuff in work.
Vibe.
What is it?
The vibe?
Yeah, something like that. We don't have it. Yeah, in accountancy. But
I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of vibe.
Kind of. It'll come to me in about 4 days and I'll send you an email. Be like, that's it. That's the word. But you're building work happiness.
Yeah. What's the one Irish word every Aussie should know? We're going to do a little bit of Irish quiz. You got to answer them quick.
Notions.
No tangents.
Notions.
Notions was
best word ever. So notions is a one-word statement for, it's kind of, I suppose, tall poppy syndrome would be quite like it, but somebody has notions. All Irish all Irish people know what notions means, right? So you just have to say to an Irish person and nod your head, notions, and they'll know what you mean. Basically, someone who thinks they're great. They've got notions, which is a sign of our inner self-depreciation that we can't even like ourselves without everyone else going, notions. My mother loves the word. And I, in turn, yes, I was.
What do you miss most about Ireland?
The general global enthusiasm about anything that is an interruption to the norm. Like, I remember I trained in Ireland as an accountant. That was a weird sound, but I trained in Ireland as an accountant. And I remember it was a sunny day and we said to the partner, can we go and get ice creams? And he was like, yeah, get one for everyone. And we just went down to the shop and then we sat outside and we all had ice creams because it was sunny. Like in school, if it was sunny, you got to have school. Somebody would just go, let's have school outside. And the teacher would be like, yeah. And we'd all take our desks and like this was fluctuating weather. So you were transporting a classroom to the outside with a very good chance it was going to rain again quickly. But it's like a cultural willingness.
Make the most of the day.
To completely jump into anything that just is a break, like bank holidays and public holidays. I can't even tell you how excited everybody gets. Like it's ridiculous. And Christmas is an entire other subject. Like my husband, I brought him back to Ireland for Christmas once and he just couldn't understand it. Like grown men, not even on Christmas Day. We're talking like 2 weeks before Christmas, walking around in their Christmas jumpers, just doing their business, like not anything. They weren't at a party. So that's what I miss. I miss the willingness to be just completely
bonkers.
Yeah. All together. Morale. That's the word. That was the word I was looking for. The morale. Yeah, we have general morale. Yeah.
Which Irish saying do you still catch yourself using at work?
Oh, I used one in work and it was actually on a call with HR, which is problematic. I shouldn't have used it. And they were like, you shouldn't use that. But then they got it wrong. So that made my day. It was fur coat, no knickers, right? So fur coat, no knickers is a phrase whereby you're fancy, but you're not clean. You've kind of you've gone up in stations, but you're a trash bag still. Like and it's so good. What was it HR said? HR got it wrong. And they went all fur, no knickers. And I was like, that's not what I said. I didn't say that. You said that. And I have no one to complain to now because you said that and you're HR. So saying hello to our HR people. Shout out to them, but that was my favourite. And I will disseminate that through my Irish friends and they'd be like, oh my God, notions.
What's the most Irish thing about you that still confuses your Aussie colleagues?
Grammar. So when I get something grammatically wrong, I used to think that a word had to have a space after it before the comma because it was rude to the comma to have it in such close proximity to the word. So I was like, give it some space and let it be. And Grant came back to me and he was like, why do you always do this? And I said, that's Irish grammar. That's what I was taught. And of course, Grant being Grant, he's a very detailed man. He went off and checked it. He came back and I had made it up on the spot. Like I was like, this sounds reasonable. And he came back, he's like, Siobhain, that's incorrect. I was like, oh, right. Okay. Yeah, no, I didn't know that. The ability to lie on cue and my fake tan. My fake tan confuses my office no end because I can go from day to day, day one, porcelain, day two, completely orange, except for my hands. And then I'll move my hands up to my face and they're like, don't do that because they're very different. So my fake tan and my grammar, probably.
And what would your dream Irish dinner guest be?
Oh, God.
Whom? What?
Who? I suppose it would have to be, anyone from Dairy Girls, if you've seen it. It's amazing. It's my favourite show. Or any of my friends, actually, because I haven't seen them in a while. So I'd happily have dinner with any of my friends from school. But like anyone, to be honest, we're pretty friendly. Like it doesn't have to be a specific person. Obviously not bad people. I don't want to have dinner with them. But generally anyone else would be grand.
Or if they have notions.
If they have notions. But no, you would have dinner. And you would encourage the notions and then you tell everyone about it afterwards. You're like, oh my God, you'll never guess what she said.
All fur, no knickers?
Fur coat, no knickers, yeah.
All fur.
All fur. You've got it wrong because it's an Australian thing.
We're going to send you to
you guys are leaning
HR,
into that.
You're gone. And Irish love their sport.
Yeah.
I like drinking at sport.
We love our sport, but we're just... We're pathologically bad at it. But we're excellent at a concept called losing well. So most countries, you either win or you lose, whereas we have the middle ground of we lost, but we lost well. It was close. So except for rugby, and we're excellent at rugby.
How many that's my final question is, how many Rugby World Cup
All of them.
Semi-finals have Ireland made?
All of them. To my knowledge, like they're here or there. That's where the line comes in.
Yeah. The answer's 0.
Nice. We've got a few. We reached the quarterfinals of the Soccer World Cup, Italia 90. That holds a special place in every Irish person's heart because it was our first World Cup ever. And it was in Italy. And we got to the quarterfinals. I was 9. And I remember even at the time I was like, for a country that stops for anything, like Australia, you stop for one horse race a year. We stop for everything. The whole country lost its mind. And I remember going to parties, house parties here in Australia, and somebody be like, oh, put on the Italia 90 thing. And we put the video on and we'd all cry. We're like, oh God, it's so good. So yes, rugby, we're just excellent at that. We're very, very good at rugby. We're just unlucky sometimes that we don't win. But
I think the Irish are best at
everything. Dancing.
Telling people how good they are at rugby at the moment.
Yeah, because we've got nothing else. Everything else, every other success we've had, the person has turned out to have been on drugs. So we can't, even the horse. We had Cian O'Connor won an Olympic medal for horse jumping. Show jumping. Horse jumping. Show jumping. And his horse got done for drugs. And we were like, here. We're never celebrating the Olympics again. Thankfully, we haven't had to.
The great Irish MMA fighter, Conor McGregor.
No, we don't talk about him.
He's bad now.
We don't talk about him. So Andrew Tato, that's what he's called now, which I just think is genius. So Tato is a type of crisps in Ireland, very famous, and he's a misogynist. So somebody, not me, came up with the phrase that he was now Andrew Tato, which you have to applaud the
creativity.
Yeah, the creativity under pressure
to
have come. I think it was the next day. But yeah, no, we don't. He's not one of ours. Yeah, no, we're not claiming him.
You punted him.
No, he's probably from England. That's what one of our favourite comedians
if
says.
anyone to get in touch with you, Siobhain, to talk to you about payroll compliance audits, just to get some advice.
Irish grammar.
That's Irish grammar. Yeah, anything. I'm wax lyrical on those topics.
Is that the correct usage? Not really.
No, but
it's a good effort.
Each to their own.
How would someone get in touch with you?
Electronic mail. No, but if you go to, I think we've got a new website now. And we got some new branding, which you can imagine was very entertaining for accountants. StuartBrown. Yep. I forgot to mention them, yeah. StuartBrown is where I work. So you just look us up on the World Wide Web and you will find me. But I'm on the website somewhere. Deep dive it.
Perfect.
Or email me. I don't know.
Thank you very much. I hope this was time well spent.
I think so. I hope so. We'll see.
Thanks for listening to this episode.
If this was time well spent for you, follow the podcast so you never miss an episode.
If you want to support us, leave a review and share it with someone in your network who might get value from it.
Finally, a thanks to our partners who make this possible. Painters, your design and construction partner.
And Optum Allied Health, your physiotherapy and allied health partner. You can find the links in the show notes.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.